we're going to introduce David Klink, who is the chair of CSFFA, and David is going to usher in the beginning of the awards segment of this program, which is going to be the Hall of Fame inductees.
Hi, everyone. I'm David Klink, and I am the chair of the CSFFA Hall of Fame. I took over this mantle from the very capable hands of Clint Budd in April of this year. I want to take a moment to recognize the great work that Clint Budd has done to make the Hall of Fame a marvelous part of what CSFFA does. Thank you, Clint, for your mentorship, your leadership, and, well, just for being you. I can succeed you, but I cannot replace you. I am waiting impatiently for the robot overlords to replace us all. Now, I may not be dressed as well as Mark this evening, but I do have one of my favorite ties on. Which I thought would be appropriate for this evening. On to the Hall of Fame. CSFFA has inducted 3 people into the Hall of Fame in 2023. Congratulations to John Robert Colombo, Michelle Sagara, and Clifford Samuels for their induction. Thank you to the 2023 Hall of Fame jury for their work. The jury members were Jill and Walter Sinclair, Mark Lizzie Lefebvre, and Julie E. Cherneda. Here are very brief bios of the inductees. Please visit their websites for more information about them. John Robert Colombo has been called the Master Gatherer for his compilations of Canadiana. He is a member of the Order of Canada and Order of Ontario and has written, compiled, and translated more books than any other serious Canadian author. More than 200 titles of his books have been published since 1960. Please visit colombo.ca for more information.
I am pleased to have my modest contribution to the canon of Canadian fantastic literature, science fiction, fantasy fiction, and weird fiction, recognized by the Aurora community and drawn to the attention of readers as knowledgeable as yourselves, notably the diligent Mark Leslie Lefebvre and the ever-vigilant and exceedingly generous Robert J. Sawyer. I consider myself a fan of this literature only because way back in the 1950s, when I still lived in my hometown of Kitchener, Ontario, I discovered this literature by myself on the paperback and magazine racks of the original location on King Street of the Walper Tobacco Shop, which is considered to be Canada's oldest tobacco shop, built in 1891. I then sought out hardbound volumes at the Kitchener Public Library, which was erected as a Carnegie institution in 1910. I bought paperbacks and pulp magazines and borrowed hardcover books from Cool's Used Bookstore, also on King Street, with a basement full of old and interesting and intriguing books. Ipso facto, Shazam, I emerged a fan. The so-called golden age of science fiction extended into the early 1950s, so as an enthusiast for this literature, I guess I was part of it as a reader and sometimes collector. I particularly cherished sub-writers as H.G. Wells, Arthur C. Clarke, Ray Bradbury, and Canada's own A.E. Van Vogt. But I must not fail to mention Judith Merrill. A great day of my life was when she, along with the urbanologist Jane Jacobs, moved from New York City to Toronto, where I met both of them. I cherished what Judy wrote about my works after she discovered my interest in establishing the past history for the country's imaginative literature, with the anthology titled Other Canadas, issued in 1979. With that anthology and a few others, I was anxious to add SFFA to the roster of Canada's literary past. So I was something of a scholar, something of a seer. If in this account I have favored the past over the future, it is not because I no longer care for today's SFNF. It is because my past is very real to me, as your present should be very real to you. Notable works of literature are being written every day and published every season of the year. As it happens, the SF and F titles I published are long out of print. A few of them should be reprinted or at least borrowed from libraries. I hope my membership in the Hall of Fame will accomplish this aim and bring pleasure and insight to the readers of Canada's fantastic literature. P.S. I'm always asked this: what's your favorite work of fantastic literature? I have to sorrowfully admit my favorite works are not Canadian in origin. Both are European. Solaris, the popular Polish novel by Stanislaw Lem, and Roadside Picnic, the powerful Russian novel by Arkady and Boris Strugatsky, the so-called Strugatsky brothers. Both novels have been memorably filmed by the outstanding director, Andrei Tarkovsky. Thank you very much, Aurora.
Michelle Sagara has written over 40 fantasy novels and has been nominated twice for the Astounding Award for Best New Writer. She also has a long-running book review column, Musing on Books, for the Magazine of Fantasy and Science Fiction with over 50 columns. Please visit michellesagara.com for more information.
Clint asked me a number of years ago if I would accept a Hall of Fame nomination, and I said yes. Well, I said, sure, why not? Because there's no harm in it. Because mostly I didn't expect that I'd actually be chosen, unless they'd run out of appropriate authors. So I really, really wasn't expecting to be honored this way. I wrote my first book when I was 6 years old. It was a picture book with terrible pictures. And I can still remember my crushing despair because no matter how carefully I wrote, the letters never looked like the type in a real book. I, at the time, believed that all books are written and drawn by hand. The fact that there were 50 of them didn't actually occur to me. When I started to write novels, it was a very deliberate choice. To that point, the only publications to my credit were poetry in the University College Review. But poetry, to my mind, was the art of wrapping a metaphor around an experience so that those who had experienced the same thing would actually feel it more strongly. They could see the metaphor. It was speaking to people who had my experience. Those who hadn't had that experience wouldn't understand it. Books or stories or novels were a different art. They were the art of taking a reader on a journey that would lead them in the end to have the emotional experience that impelled me to write in the first place. So, also, poetry is great if you're an academic. It's a great and necessary adjunct. It's possibly hard to make a living off it if you're not Carol Ann Duffy, who, by the way, is excellent. So I thought, okay, I will be an author. I will try to make a living doing this. This will be my career. And I write books that I'm very serious about. I write books that I love, except maybe in copy editing when I curse myself and feel stupid. But I've never felt that I write the kind of books that would get nominated for awards. Awards, therefore, have never really been in my sight. I wanted to write my books. I wanted to find my readers. So I wanted to find readers who would be interested in the stories I was driven to tell. And I know, because I have worked in a bookstore for most of my life, since I was 16, in fact, that there is no book that every reader will love. I sometimes question the taste of people who hated things I loved, but that's a separate issue for a bookseller. That doesn't happen. So I am grateful. I am beyond grateful to have had the chance to find my audience and find my readers. I am grateful that I am still here and still working. I realize that there's a large amount of luck involved. I realize that there are authors whose books I loved who disappeared. It isn't because their books weren't good. They had to be good. I love them. It was partly luck. So I am grateful that if my books aren't books that I personally would nominate for awards, the body of work itself is still worthy of consideration. So thank you all for letting me be me, letting my books be my books, and honoring me because of them.
Clifford Samuels is the Aurora Awards administrator and has been the pillar of support for Calgary fandom for over 40 years, his contribution reaching beyond the city, beyond the province, indeed, beyond the country.
Evening. I first want to thank David Klink, Clint Budd, and this year's Hall of Fame jury. I was so surprised when Clint called me to let me know that I was being inducted this year. Oh, I knew I was on the list, but I figured I wouldn't be considered until after I retired from the KISFA board. And that might not happen for a while. I enjoy running the Aurora Awards, and I love how excited people get when they've been nominated. It's great to be the bearer of good news. I joined fandom to meet people when I first moved to Calgary. I was a kid, fresh out of university, and fairly shy. Hard to believe that now. Fandom gave me an outlet to grow. I stayed because I wanted to help create conventions that I wanted to go to and to meet authors that I read. I wanted to help where I could because I enjoyed working with others and, well, we've always achieved something very special. I've made many friends over the years through fandom. Many of them are like family. Meeting at a convention, whether it's here in Calgary or elsewhere, it's like a family reunion. It's time to catch up, find out what each of us has been doing, and to have a good dinner. My love of books and movies has always been my driving force. I met my wife Eileen through a convention, and with our shared love of fandom and the friends we've made, it's been a great journey with plenty more to come. I could not think of a better way to live. Being inducted into the KISFA Hall of Fame is such an amazing honor and is so appreciated. Thank you.